Hello everyone, I'm Anna, also known as LavyStitch, and today I'm going to show you 5 different ways to embroider letters. So the first stitch that we'll start off with is a back stitch, and this is a pretty simple stitch to do. So you start off by putting the needle in, and back in here, and then back through that hole that you just made for a back stitch. So this is quite a simple stitch to do, and I'd really recommend it if you're kind of a beginner, and this is a really good way to start off doing letters. In and back through. I would recommend that when you're going round curved lines like this, to make the stitches slightly smaller. Like that. And I'll do the same with the A, starting from here. And there you go. This next stitch will be a split stitch, which is pretty similar to a back stitch, but we're splitting the stitch instead. So I'll start with this V. So you bring the needle in, and like a back stitch, take it here, but instead of going back through that hole, we're going to go in the middle of this stitch, like that. Then I'll go to the next one and split the former. Like so. So for straight lines like this, this V made of 2 straight lines, I like to round off this line just with like splitting over itself, and then I'll make a new stitch here. Hopefully you'll understand when you see. And so that was me rounding off that line, and I'm making a new line here. Just for this specific letter, just to make it look a bit more uniform, and splitting that one there. So I really like the effect that this stitch has. It almost looks like a braid, which can be really nice for some letters. And I'll continue to do that with the Y. And again, I'm just going to go back in here and round off this stitch just so it all looks very uniform and finished. And that's a split stitch. The next stitch will be a stem stitch, which is quite simple, but it can be very effective to add an elegant type of feel to letters. So we're going to start off again, taking our needle through and in. And then we'll take our needle back to like halfway between these 2 stitches where you came in, between this stitch, sorry, where you came in. Take the thread through and bring it to the next point in the line. Then we'll take the needle back to the halfway point and at the next point in the line. So maybe sometimes you might have to just move the thread over just so you can see where you're going to put the needle in the fabric. Halfway through, and then at the next point. This is actually quite a tricky letter to sew, I think, the letter S, because of how curvy it is. But hopefully you can see what's happening. Okay, I'm going to do it again on the T. Okay, and that's your stem stitch. Our next stitch will be a satin stitch, and this is best for text that is bold. So this is why I've made this text bold. I'll also just make this a circle here so you can see. So I'll start with the circle. So you take our needle in and we go to the other side. And then next to the hole that you've just made and next to the opposite one too. Take this. Oops. To fill that gap there. With a satin stitch, I would say to decide on the direction that you're going in. So you can do this diagonally or vertically and horizontally, like this example. But if you keep all the stitches going the same direction for each letter, it would look very neat and like satin. Another tip too, to make sure that each stitch is close together to avoid any gaps. And I'll just carry on doing that for the T. So you bring your needle in and across. Back next to the hole that you've just made. And that is a satin stitch. Our final stitch is a chain stitch, which is a little bit more complicated, but can look very elegant. So we'll take the needle in here, make one stitch, bring the needle through to the next part of the line, and take our needle and put it under this stitch that we've just made. Bring the needle through and back into the hole that it's come from. And then we'll just repeat this. So the next stitch, you bring it underneath this loop here. And back in. Bring it in and underneath and then back through. So it should start to look like a chain by now. This is just a little knot that you can pull. Through, under, and back. Sometimes to round off the stitch, I like to just put my needle back in and just go in the middle of that. I just like the look of that. So I'll start another one. And that's the chain stitch. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear what you think. Happy making.